If you want to write a fabulous family history, one of the things you need to do is make sure you're not confusing your audience. Howdy, I'm Devin Noel Lee with Write Your Family History, where I teach you how to improve the stories of your ancestors' lives so you can finally get it published. One of the most common mistakes that I find family history writers make is using pronouns too much. In fact, I call it the pronoun game. If you ever watched the channel Cinema Sins, you know one of the most frequent sins is the pronoun game, where a character mentions pronouns that another character would have to clarify who or what we're talking about. She's coming. He went there. Who went there and who's coming? That's the pronoun game that we want to avoid when we are writing our family history stories. Let's take this writing example. It wasn't enough in this God-forsaken place just to be an orphan. How can sleeping in the open air even be a crime for a 14-year-old? And now I'm being sent to some new hole called Bailoa on Cockatoo Island. The sleeping quarters are locked at night. Once the candles die out, it's pitch as black. Strange noises floated into us. So we talked about he and we talked about she being a pronoun game, but another pronoun example is us. Strange noises floated into us. Who? Who is us? A way to correct that is to say, strange noises floated into the room where I slept with 4 other prisoners. Now, you may be thinking, why, oh, why is prisoners in quotation marks? Well, in this particular stories, they weren't really prisoners. They were in an orphanage, or so I've been told. And so she's being facetious in how she's writing about this story of being prisoners. So that's one way to spot the pronoun game. He, she, they, us, we, him, her, so on and so forth. And the way to correct it is to give us the noun or the noun phrase that helps us know who you're talking about. Here's another line from that story. We sang together a lot when we walked down on the beach. So if you find yourself saying we who, then you know that you need to correct the pronoun and use a noun or noun phrase instead. Myself and other cellmates, or other cellmates and I, which would probably make more sense. But you see how if it's just he or she, we need to name that person on occasion. But when the pronoun is multiple people, we need to define who they are every so often. Here's another example from a writing workshop I led. And it said they rented a farm in the same area as their families and their 2 children were born there. John was busy running a large farm. So what are the pronouns that are problematic? The first one I see is they. Now, this slide is from a PowerPoint presentation, and you may think, well, it's on the previous slide. I'm going to recommend that on each slide, you at least identify who you're talking about once. John and Bess rented a farm in the same area as their families, and their 2 children were born there. John was busy running a large farm. That's a little bit better. Now, we might want to tackle their families and clarify that they rented a farm in the same areas as their birth families, their parents' household, or something just to be very clear. Then now we have that their 2 children were born there. And it follows their families. Well, did the families have the 2 children? Or did John and Bess have the 2 children? It might warrant adding a period and breaking that sentence up so we know they bought a house near their parents' families, their parents' household, period. They, or the couple, had their first 2 children there, or 2 of their children there. And then if you want to, you can take out the John and make that a he. I'm not telling you to get rid of all of your pronouns. I'm trying to invite us to be very clear. The first sentence has John, Bess, 2 children, and their families. So that's at least four groups of people, and we're using multiple pronouns, and it can be very confusing. If I'm giving you value so far, will you hit the like button and then leave a comment of some of the struggles that you have in keeping people separated? So let me share with you a quick writing example and walk you through how to spot the excessive pronouns. The first thing I would invite you to do is to do a control find and start with the common pronouns he. So he is found here and here and here. And then we have a she, which is picked up. And then the, we're not going to worry about these so much. But highlight the various pronouns and see, do I have multiple pronouns in one sentence that I need to go back and clarify? So that's my first thing. And the next thing I need to do is count how many people are talked about in the sentence. Now, he was not a great husband, and the colloquial term would be that he was a ladies' man. So that sentence is just talking about one person. She separated from him for some time before reconciling long enough to get pregnant with their second child, Gregory. 3 people in that sentence. We can go ahead and utilize some pronouns, but since we're introducing Gregory, we can't take away his name there. We might want to go ahead and mention who the she is, but that sentence really only has 3 people. He was born on the 22nd April 1940 in Canton. The previous sentence had 3 people, 2 of them were male. Are we referring to the birth to Gregory, or are we referring the birth to the original he for the first sentence? They were together in the house, 1940s home, and gave an address. So the they is one group, but who are we talking about? We think we're talking about the husband, wife, and second child, and I'm guessing the first child, even though it's not mentioned. That's one they, and that could work. But how can we make this better? Well, first, we want to go ahead and put the name of the individual. So the man in this story is Clarence. Now, Clarence was not a great husband, and the colloquial term would be that he was a ladies' man. We can keep that second he because we know exactly who is the ladies' man. Clarence is the ladies' man. She is separated from him. Well, who's the she? Her name happens to be Alice. So Alice separated from him. Him who? The him in the previous sentence. That's Clarence. We can go ahead and keep that. However, sometimes to reduce the number of pronouns in a sentence, I will talk about something that tells me a description of Clarence. Her husband would be easy. Clarence was not the great husband. Alice separated from her husband, and that just clarifies, leaving no doubt who the him is we're talking about. Alice separated from her husband for some time, reconciling long enough to get pregnant with their, okay, this sentence is still talking about Alice and her husband, so we can go ahead and keep this there. That's fine, and Gregory is fine. It's unclear who was born in 1940. Now, you may go, well, it's obvious. They just talked about the child, so that would be their birth date. Yes, but we want to go for clarity in every instance. So one thing you can do is not necessarily use the Gregory's name again. How about use a different pronoun? Who, that, this, those, these. We can use alternative pronouns to help make things clear, and then we can turn this into a clause. I know I'm getting really technical here. So who was born on that date, Gregory, comma, and give the date, and that makes it very clear. They were together in the 1940s. I still think we need to just add one clarifying term. How about we put the family? And then we know it's Clarence, Alice, Gregory, which is the second child, and we presume, depending on how this paragraph fixed in the overall story that Gregory is part of that topic. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, now Clarence is the beginning of a paragraph that comes after another paragraph that likely mentions Clarence by name. Should we still work on the pronoun game and put Clarence in there? It depends on what the previous paragraph says. If the previous paragraph only talks about Clarence, it identifies Clarence at least by name, and then other pronouns refer to him, and now we're going into the second paragraph and we're still talking about Clarence, then maybe you can start the beginning of that second paragraph with Clarence. However, I have another technique called the newspaper technique, and you'll find that video right here.